Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sally Walker. I'm a non-executive director at WithYouWithMe. I also, somewhat ironically, have catastrophic Teams failure today, so I cannot see anything on this call, although I hear my audio is working. Fortunately, I had planned to speak as little as possible and to allow our fantastic panel to take the floor, and that is very much going to have to be the case today, given the challenges of Teams. Thank you for making the time for this conversation. We wanted today to focus on how we make AI a force for good, and particularly where we're thinking about AI as a force for good in workforce transformation. How do we make sure that we have tech on the team that is helping us humans and our human creativity, human brains and human skills really be a force for good? How can we accelerate growth, creativity, inclusion? How can we use AI to tap or untap deeper, richer human potential? That's what we're all about at WithYouWithMe. We're looking for skills, we're looking for insights into human potential, and we're looking to unleash opportunity so that we can build tech-enabled workforces. So that's what we're going to do. If you've got questions or comments, please put them up in the chat, and Sophie and the team will monitor them there. Hopefully I'll sort my tech and be able to scroll alongside you. If not, I apologise. But we're going to have a conversation around leadership, around organisational change, around traditional subjects like psychological safety and trust, but trust with tech on the team. We're going to think about skills, we're going to think about systems thinking, we're going to think about recruitment, retention, recycling of talent in that environment where lots of us are nervous about the impact of AI on our jobs, where lots of the organisations that we're working with and talking to are thinking really hard about who to reskill, how to reskill, who to bring recycle. That's been immensely valuable over time. All of that is discussion. So I'm going to hand over to the panel. Oli, Louise and me are here with. They're going to lead the conversation. And given my computer failure, I'm going to ask Oli Latham from Pearson to introduce himself. And then Oli, can you pass the baton to Louise and then on to Maddie? Thank you so much. Oli, over to you.
No, thanks, Sally, and good to see everybody. And thanks for the opportunity. So, yeah, Oliver Latham, I work at Pearson, which is one of the world's largest learning companies. We operate across a range of domains, but particularly around talent planning, talent sourcing, talent development. And I've spent a lot of time over the last 15, 20 years looking at workforce problems, and in particular spent the last 3 to 4 years looking at the enterprise skilling problem. And so looking forward to sharing some thoughts today. Louise, why don't you go next, as you're next on my camera.
Thanks, Oli. Good morning, everyone. I'm Louise Atkinson. I'm Chief People Officer here at Babcock. Babcock International is a global defence company. We have about 28,000 colleagues around the world. Around 70% of them are UK-based. So my role is to support the organisation in delivering our really important work today and preparing for the needs of our customers and governments and all stakeholders really globally for the next period of time, which is, as you all will know, is particularly interesting and challenging. So yeah, that's me, and I'll hand over to Maddie.
Hi guys, thanks for having me. So I'm Maddie Ainsworth. I'm an HR advisor working in BAE Systems, so a global defence company, but in the air sector for me. I personally work with small teams to develop AI pilots across the air sector. So my role is all about the human element of that. So working with different employee groups, getting feedback from users on the ground, people testing our pilots, engaging with our trade unions. And our goal is essentially to test and train our organisation's AI muscle.
Brilliant, thank you, Maddie. And I'm now on a phone, having killed my errant computer that doesn't like Teams today. The joy of Teams. Good to see so many of you online, and thanks again for your time. Oli, I'm going to start with you as we kick off this conversation in more depth. And I'm fascinated, given your background at Pearson, what you're seeing as the impact of AI on the market for training, for education. How are we bringing tech into our lives to make it all better? So my question, what are you seeing as the key trends in the workforce of the future, and how do you see tech helping there?
Yeah, thanks, Sally. I think if I kind of start a little bit at the problem statement, which to me, when it comes to skills in particular, is how do we make good decisions about human capital? And actually, the problem that I see on there is having poor data. So how do you start to think about that? And part of the challenge is when you think about trends is we all know the impact of AI, we all know about the impact of technology changing the world of work. But what we start to see is things like, what's a world look like when we have agents as part of our workforce? What does it look like when we essentially have tasks completely fulfilled by, autonomous co-workers? And so because of that, we're seeing a huge requirement and a continuous need to keep learning, because foundation skills, human skills endure, but actually technical skills evolve so rapidly that we've got to learn and learn and learn and relearn as we go through our careers. And so when we look at what impact that is having, that speed of change, if you like, Pearson's done some work looking at, we call it lost in transition, which is essentially the cost to an economy of the time from people leaving learning to earning, so from education to work, the time from moving from earning to earning, so from one job to another job, and the displacement from technology in work. And what we're seeing there is actually a £96 billion gap in UK GDP as a result of those three stages of transition. And I can only see that getting more if we don't address the problem of helping people train and retrain more quickly so that that gap can be shortened. So I think that's a big and important trend. One of the other areas that we've looked at is with ServiceNow. We spent some time analysing 10 countries across the world and the impact of AI on work. And when we looked at that, what was really interesting was actually we didn't just look and isolate the impact of AI, we also looked at the demand of work. And what we found in 8 out of those 10 countries, and hopefully this plays to the human and the positive side of this, is that demand is outstripping supply. So what that means is we're seeing that over the next 5 years, more jobs being created as a result of economic demand, not just AI demand and change, but economic demand, which is not being fulfilled by AI offset. And so that actually presents a really interesting potential and opportunity for organizations and for countries as we see this gap continuing to grow, even though a lot of the stories talk about the gap, about AI impacting work and losing jobs. It's actually about the shape and the size of jobs and the type of jobs that are changing, not the volume and the demand. And so that's a really critical point. And if you combine those two things of, well, wait a minute, jobs are changing rapidly, there's a massive GDP gap because of it. There are some solutions out there that we need to bring and need to think about. So that's a second big trend that we're seeing. And then I've sort of touched on it a little bit, which is around the importance of human skills being enduring. And so, even though the technology coming and impacting, when we look at that, we see things like, we've heard it before, but critical thinking, communication, leadership, complex problem solving, ethical decision making. These are skills that, regardless of the technology, are going to be needed. And so we need to keep investing in those sides when it comes to human capital, jobs and roles. So to me, it's really about demand is a mismatch, the supply and demand. And so it has to be about this training, reskilling, supporting people through life in a different way than we have done before.
And Oli, your figures are astonishing there. I mean, £96 billion. I've said in the past, we've invested in, or corporations have invested in tracking our online shopping, but it's difficult to get the money in EdTech to invest in our online learning. And, say what you will about the UK curriculum or global curricula and are fit for digital skills in the digital environment. Are you seeing anyone make a really good go of this? Are you seeing people, organisations getting their investment right and really making the most of their talent?
You know what, Sally? It's a really good question. And I think what we see And I think there's a move, it's shifting. But what we see more often than not is organizations spending money to satisfy a tick box exercise. That sounds like a little bit over. Like, we've now provided learning to our team, to our organization. It's now about driving engagement, right? We've got this, we spent all this money. How are we showing that we've got good return on our investment? And that good return on investment is often measured by how many people are using it, how often are they on it, rather than what impact is this making in our organizations, in our economy. And so actually, if you really come down to it and think about, well, what is the problem we're trying to solve? It's about competence, it's about time to value, it's about skill gain in the right areas. Are we measuring that effectively? And that's why I started with, the problem is actually data. The problem is actually understanding the skills that you need as an organization to be successful, and therefore training and reskilling people aligned with the future of what your workforce is going to look like, because that will unlock productivity, rather than, here you go, here's a massive library of everything you could possibly ever want, go for your life, employees. And, I'm not saying everyone does that, but it's a bit of a spray and pray model. If I take one example just to bring it to life, we're talking to a customer about risk training and compliance training, right? Not everyone's excitedly cup of tea, right? But we've all been through it. We've all ticked the box and clicked the buttons. But it's largely a single size model, right? But actually, if you think about how can you start to create a greater, more personalized training model that proves competence, that then reduces risks in a business, that does two things. It means that you spend less time on the training because you're only training people on a bit they don't know, and you're getting people to avoid risks that's going to save money in the organization, just as a way of thinking differently about how you apply training. That's a model that I think potentially drives to a commercial outcome, rather than just, here you go at your life, here's a big library. Maybe I haven't answered your question, but hopefully that gives you a feel for the way that we think.
No, I think it's fascinating, and we talk a lot about the skills gap and skills lag. And do we actually have a skill shortage, or do we just have an inability to train rapidly, effectively, and deploy the talent into the right place? And I do wish we could change the national narrative on that and work with government, with sectors, with the community writ large, really, to ensure that our very, very considerable human potential is actually realised wherever it's needed. So thank you, Oli. There's some really helpful early indicators of where this conversation might go. Louise, I'm going to come to you next, if I may, because I'm conscious that you have been doing some exciting things at Babcock in terms of AI supporting the workforce. And I'd love to hear from you about where you think technology is best accelerating progress in that human potential piece that Oli's been helpfully outlining for us.
Sure, thanks. So the way we're thinking about this in Babcock, and bear in mind we've got, similar to Maddie's organisation, we've got a very large industrial workforce as part of our organisation. And one of the things that we're talking about is the difference with this revolution compared to maybe the industrial revolution or the digital revolution is that the changes that came with those big kind of macro changes in the world were a bit slower paced and maybe a bit more predictable. What we're seeing with the AI revolution is the pace of change is so phenomenal, and that's a really kind of big feature of this change. And it's also more democratic. So that's the word that we keep using when we think about this technology and the level of democracy it's bringing into the workplace. You only need to give somebody access to a new piece of functionality, Copilot, or pick your bit of functionality, and they will find ways to use it, find ways to change the way they work, which is much less kind of centrally led and defined by organizations and much more organic. And so people are finding their own ways to use this technology and their own ways to change their roles. In some of our sites, we've still got rooms with signs on that say typists. And it always makes me smile because we've still got a nod to the digital revolution and the change that brought to, we don't now have typing pools of, individuals typing up people's meeting notes from handwritten notes. This isn't the first time this has happened to the world of work, but it is quicker and it is more democratic in that we can't really predict what it's going to do. For us, that means we...
Louise, can I just Can I just ask you a question on that? Because for you and Maddie, I think the perception from the outside of the defence world is highly regulated, possibly highly unionised, possibly highly managed. So that democratic approach to change is really interesting.
Yeah.
How are you managing that balance between what the individual thinks is a good answer and what the organisation thinks is the right answer?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So I think it took us a little while to get our heads around how we do this in a secure fashion, given particularly at the moment some of the security threats that we face, and particularly as a sector, and particularly from a people perspective. And there was a lot of, well, we can't possibly go near AI because we're a defence company and it's not secure. And we've had to do a lot of work to overcome a bit of those myths, and actually just to understand what we mean. What do we mean by AI? What do we mean by this tool set? And actually, the tool set itself is changing every day. There are always, particularly in our nuclear business, there are always going to be, there's always going to be strong need for corporate governance, for safety controls, and for those kind of things to be well defined. But there's also a big proportion of the work that we do that doesn't fall into that category. Not everything we do does. So we have to be very clear about where we need that constraint, and where we can afford to experiment a little bit more, where we can afford to be a little bit more adventurous, and give our people a bit more of that kind of choice about how they do their work. And one of the best things that we've seen through this has been the inclusion benefit of giving people access to a broader tool set. I had the most beautiful note from somebody in my function, actually, who's dyslexic, who came to us and said that they've now got access to this tool set that can help them write emails much more quickly. They feel more confident communicating in a written form. They're now able to work more quickly. They're not having to proofread everything they write, and it's just transformed their level of confidence in the workplace. And we did a piece of research in one of our main sites in Plymouth, in Devonport, on the dockyard down there recently, through our neurodiversity network, that estimated that about 30% of people have some form of neurodivergence. And so this tool set should give access to roles, maybe to activities, to jobs, to people that might not have had them before. And when you talk about exploiting human capital, that for me is a really simple good news story of some of this technology. We're seeing the benefit of that already, I think.
So 30% of your workforce, Oli's 96 billion in lost revenue. Are you able to make the case for change, for investment in tools that are just going to help people rather than big bits of defence kit? Is that narrative shifting for you in Babcock?
I think it already has shifted, yeah, and I think the investment's already coming through, both from and particularly about how we profile our work out over the long term. Again, like BAE, we have very, very long-term programs, and that does make investment easier. It makes investment decisions. It means there are different drivers for those investment decisions. One of the things I always say is, there is the great thing about industry, and one of the things I love about working in business, is that there is genuinely limitless potential for investment as long as there is a return on that investment. So it doesn't all have to come from government. It doesn't all have to come from the public purse. Industry is ready and able to make very significant investments, whether that's in technology or skills or just changing the way people work, with the right commercial enablement in place and the right collaboration, the right partnerships across industry. And I think we've probably been a bit slow to the party on that in the UK. I think other countries, particularly in Europe, have probably got their act together a little bit more, particularly on the collaboration side, and particularly on collaboration with government. But we're getting there, I think, and we are now starting to see the investment.
Sally, just on that, if you're okay for me to come in quickly, I think what's really fascinating is, and what we're seeing is, a lot of people have invested in AI, but without clear use cases. And so the problem, to Louise's point, is actually then what's the return on that investment? And then that creates nervousness or worry, or why is this not just unlocked productivity? Because I spent a load of money on AI, and why has it not done something? And I think, these are things we learn as we go, of course, but that's probably a fairly common mistake we see. And coming back to the kind of investment in learning, you don't just spray and pray. You need to think about, well, actually, what are the things I'm trying to achieve with this, and then put it into that use case.
Brilliant, lovely. And I hope, Maddie, that sets you up fantastically well for it's not just about increasing your compute, it's actually about thinking about some of the problems you need to solve. In BAE Systems, do you want to talk about some of the areas where you've really seen these case studies come to life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first of all, people think that we need to get people to trust AI. So that is, how do you get your people to trust it? And BAE Systems is very much of the path that we don't want people to trust it. I don't think I want people to trust the AI pilots and the accelerator programs that we're delivering. I want people to exercise their human judgment, their critical thinking. So if I think specifically to a project that we've got with the Typhoon Technical Assistant, which is essentially an AI assistant for our Typhoon maintainers, that will help them search through technical publications, 54,000 service inquiries. It searches through a multitude of information that it would take our maintainers a long time to do. It presents what it thinks is the answer, but we always are telling our maintainers that it's their judgment at the end of the day that we're trusting. They're the people who are experienced, qualified, and have the final say. So I don't think we're that bothered about asking people to trust it as we are to use it. And I think in terms of getting people to use it, from my experience, it's kind of been twofold, really. So firstly, I think you have to focus on people's pain points. So the way that BAE is operating is people are putting their hand up around the sector and going, this process sucks. Like, we hate doing this. It makes our jobs difficult. It stands in the way of us being brilliant. So that's where we're directing our investment from an AI space. And that's where you unlock motivation. So fundamentally, we're leveraging AI to improve our employee experience. So when people have skin in the game, you're already half the way towards that encouraging adoption. Now, secondly, once you've unlocked that kind of motivational aspect, I think it's about demonstrating it responsibly. So from our perspective, we're trying to bring in a really diverse member of stakeholders into this conversation. So we're bringing in our trade unions, our ethics specialists, but not only them, our kind of comms specialists, our HR specialists, so that we've got a really diverse perspective here. Everyone in that room will have completely different concerns that we wouldn't expect to see from anyone else. So I think it's really important that you, A, get that motivation, but B, demonstrate that you're using that motivation in a really responsible manner.
Brilliant case studies, Maddie. Thank you. You've got me thinking, which is always a dangerous thing. Because what you describe is so powerful and evident in terms of a technology problem. But what we've also talked about here is where people are the problem. Like, we don't understand enough about ourselves. We don't understand enough about our skill sets now or future. We do the job, we think we're competent. We've got no idea what it is we might be capable of, or to go back to Oli's point, where the investment would need to come to make us even more brilliant or even better for the next role. And so I'm just curious whether any of the BAE case studies, or Louise, Oli, if you want to come in on this, how do we persuade people that they're worth investing in? Like, this is me. I want tech to help me. I want to understand my own potential. I want to understand my own skills. And actually, that's something that I can spend, not just the time and the money and the conversation that I used to have with my line manager, but also, like, please can you go away and build some tech that's going to do this for me and help me be better?
Yeah.
Have you got any examples? I'll come back to the other two.
Yeah, one kind of springs to mind around how we manage kind of non-conformance reporting. So we've got, one of our things that we have to handle in the manufacturing world is that when things don't go to plan, we need to document them, and we need a mechanism in order to drill down into that data to understand what's caused it and how can we prevent it in the future. Now, one of the things that we're seeing is around behaviours. So historically, to Louise's point, I think we've very much had this mindset of being in a highly regulated government environment and almost a learned helplessness of, oh, well, we won't be able to implement that because we're in the defence sector, etc., etc. What we've been trying to really encourage through our kind of reward and recognition programmes is behaviour where it's outside of the norm. So we think people have the ideas and they identify them, but they just need an opportunity to let them grow. So we had a quality engineer who came up with an AI solution. They put a load of personal effort into chasing right up to our manufacturing director, and he wouldn't stop until he knocked on the door of the manufacturing director and said, "You need to sponsor this. It's brilliant. Here, I've got a bit of a model of all of the opportunities that the company will benefit from." So he then sponsored that project, but we didn't leave it there. So Adam, who's the guy who raised it, he's now in that program. So we believe that he knows best. He can represent the quality engineer population better than anybody else. So he's now a key tenant. We've changed his role entirely so that, I mean, obviously with his agreement, but so that he can be that interface between what the people on the ground need and what they don't know might benefit them, spoken from one of their own, essentially.
I love that, and it really lends itself to Louise's point about the democracy, or the new democracy of individuals with powerful tools and a voice is being given to people who perhaps would not have had them in the traditional system.
Yeah, for us,
Louise,
we're thinking about. Sorry, Sally, go on.
No, I was just throwing the floor to you.
Thank you. I was gonna talk to our example around how we're thinking about how we bring more people into our sector. So defence is a growth sector for all the wrong reasons, unfortunately. But we are more and more needing to bring people with different backgrounds, different skill sets, different mindsets into our industry. And we can't just think about graduates and apprentices in that dimension. We need to think of lateral moves and how we bring people into defence who have maybe never worked in defence, maybe never saw themselves working in defence. And that's one of the ways that we're deploying technology to open up our horizons to a much broader pool of talent and a much more diverse pool of talent, and recruiting on the basis of one's aptitude for learning, acknowledging that we're not really recruiting into a permanent job. The notion of a permanent job or a job for life is gone. Trying to think about roles more as assignments. So I'm going to come and do this job. I'll probably do it for 2 years, and then either the job itself will change or I will want to go and do something different. And really solving for that mindset in the people that we bring into the sector. And we've called it like meta skills. So the skills to the learning for learning. What is your ability to learn and to bring in new skills? We run 2 different programs in areas of our business where we have a dramatic increase in kind of the volume of work, where we specifically recruit for people who don't meet all the requirements of that role, maybe meet 50% of the requirements of the role, and then we put them through and we recruit them on the basis of their ability to learn, and we test for it using an AI, kind of an online AI assessment thing, and then we rapidly skill them for the role. And it's been a really powerful process in terms of bringing people, like I say, into our sector who probably never saw themselves. We've recruited cleaners into, and they're now support operatives on the production line, and some of them are now being promoted into management roles. So the kind of macro benefit of this, and I don't think it would have been possible without the technology. So yeah, I think those are some of the use cases that we're really rapidly deploying.
And that resonates with us and our experience working across different sectors. We're finding that by genuinely moving from a testing regime to an aptitude assessment regime, you can look for potential, and you discover things that people just either have had beaten out of them by an education system that failed them, or over time have just eroded and forgotten. But people are so much more capable than they're sometimes given credit for through traditional routes. And so it's lovely to hear those stories coming. I'm conscious of time. I don't want to close conversation down. We've also got someone in the chat, James, thank you, saying he's interested in the debate that we often hear in the AI space around, is it a tool for efficiency and being lean and mean? Is it a tool for productivity? And don't just busy people go and find something else to do. Where is the effort shifting? Is it a tool for growth? Are we actually going to unleash capability and be able to do much more, possibly with less, but with that overall ambition? If you do need to drop off the line at 1 o'clock, we fully recognise people have got busy diaries, and we're grateful for your time. But please do stay with us until 1:15 if you can. we'll continue the conversation for the last 15 minutes, taking questions as we can from the chat. I'll pull them out as they come in, so just type away. So, I mean, Oli, you talked about it. You talked about the economic benefit of really understanding talent differently. Any trends? You've talked a little bit about what in your earlier comments about productivity versus efficiency, but given the interest in the room, can you just add a little bit of richness to that from Pearson's experience?
Happy to. And actually, this sort of coming back to this data problem that I think, if you think about any organization, that the quality of data that they have is usually pretty good in finance, you would expect. It's probably pretty good in operations, your supply chain, your product data, most of that stuff's pretty good. But your human capital data is often some of the worst data that organizations tend to have. And so actually being able to make good human capital decisions based on data, and Louise's point about how do you start to identify roles that instead of going, oh, you're a product manager, you must always be a product manager. Oh, you're in sales, you must always be in sales. Like, these skills are transferable. And so when we set out we looked at this problem statement 5 years ago, and I was involved in setting that, and we ended up making a couple of acquisitions as a result, was actually the problem is this data fabric. So how do we understand the world of work to break it down into smaller component pieces that isn't your job title and your highest level of education, which is often what decisions are made on. So you can come down to say, actually, that cleaner has some transferable skills that can be taken to this. And if we can upskill in this way, then suddenly we close the gap. So we do that at an aggregated level. And that's where a lot of this data comes from that we look at. So as an example, when we looked at the impact of generative AI, and I'm trying to answer James's question here, we found things like, we found in the UK, 19 million hours per week can be saved from the use of generative AI. We found that 665,000 hours can be saved in education around developing lesson programs and plans to give basically educators more time in the classroom. 406,000 in medical professions through record keeping can be saved every single week that helps people get to frontline tasks. These are in industries that, frankly, are under-resourced and overstretched, right? And so in terms of this technology, can it unlock productivity? Yes. Can it improve patient care? Can it improve student experience? Can it improve speed to value in your organization? Yes, it absolutely can. But knowing where that trapped value, if you like, is to be found is probably one of the harder things to do. And that's where data comes in. And that's where sort of we really try to help organizations find those pockets. We're not saying this is specific, to every industry, but actually, can we look at your organization of 10,000, 50,000 people and go, do you know what? This is the type of area that's going to have the most value. And by the way, these roles, the tasks in these roles, are likely to be augmented, and technology is going to impact them. Therefore, you need to think about how they're designed. You need to think about the people in those roles and what you want to do with them. You need to think about what the closest increasing roles are for those people to move into, because actually the kind of fire and rehire model is not a good one, because it's highly cost. You lose corporate knowledge. There's so many reasons where you go, actually, as I said at the beginning, demand for roles is increasing overall at a macro level. So as organizations, we want to reinvest in our talent. And I do believe this pace of change, it means that we can't employ a fire and rehire model as perhaps we might have done in the past when we see these cycles, because actually you'll be doing that every 6 months or every 12 months because things are changing so quickly. So we've got to take a different approach. I think that's how you unlock it. And just to kind of finish on the piece, when you to echo Louise's points, really, is to say, actually, once you understand where the pockets of value are, to then be able to assess effectively both around technical but also around competence and psychometric abilities and agility and things like that, gives you the understanding of who can make the jump. And then actually thinking about employing and deploying targeted learning rather than blanket learning. And so we're investing in actually the nine roles that we see as having the most impact from technology. How do we help organizations unlock value in AI for those roles, rather than, we can solve all of your problems, which we know is not the right way of going about it, because you can't do it. So just, there are ways to do it, but you've got to use data to help unlock and find the pockets of value to get the productivity gain.
I'm loving that. There's such powerful messages coming through from all three of your contributions, and thank you. I think that, stability comes from the pace of change, and actually once you've got a workforce, you're really going to have to look after it, because otherwise everything's just going to shift underneath your feet. There's a great question, given we're coming towards the end of this conversation, which is from Stephen. And Stephen's an AI avoider. Welcome to the majority. I think that's true of very many people. Finding the conversation fascinating, but saying, okay, what are your practical what's your practical advice? What are the next steps for an organisation looking to embrace some of what you've been talking about in this call? So as we move towards close, if you can just give your one or two thoughts on, if you're new to this world, where do you start? What's the practical step you take? Maddie, why don't I come to you first, and then I'll come to Louise, and I'll ask Oli to close out.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I think if you're new to the world, you need to think about the things where it's going to deliver the value for you. So I would think of kind of how we've been doing it at Microversion and BAE. What do you hate doing? What are the things in your life that you find really annoying? Now, from a personal perspective, this might be that you're hosting a dinner party and you love cooking, but you hate writing the menu. Ask AI to write the menu for you. Ask it to do the things that you don't want to do, and you can extrapolate that to a business context. So you listen to your people, and you listen to the things that are getting in the way of them being brilliant, because you hire brilliant people, you have faith in your recruitment process. So what's getting in the way of them being brilliant? Ask them that question, and then that's where I would start on a localized level. Once you've got that, you've kind of extrapolated your learnings, not just from a technical perspective, but how did that work from a comms perspective? How did that work from a governance perspective? What kind of hurdles did you really run into? Then you bank that learning, and then you go bigger.
I love that. And I'd just add one thing to that, Maddie, which is, remember that people don't always realise they're brilliant. So one of the things they've got to do is check that they know how brilliant they are and they really understand what they're capable of. And that's some kind of skills assessment, some kind of following of a framework to say, you do realise in this new world, there's things you haven't even thought of, and you've got superpowers here. Absolutely. Louise, over to you.
My bit of advice in terms of getting started would be to make it democratic. Sometimes you don't know, sometimes you can't see where those wrinkles are, where those little points of friction are, where that the person's spending half a day a week copying and pasting data from one spreadsheet to another. Sometimes you won't be able to see it. So give people, don't overthink it, the business case, give people access to something and let them experiment within boundaries, within kind of reasonable boundaries, of course, depending on the sector that you're in and the constraints that you work within. And then, as Maddie said, capture the learning and then scale it. So that's where we've seen the biggest impact, is where we've just let people experiment and they've gone, hey, I've just done this and it was brilliant. And then everyone else has been able to learn from their experience. So yeah, put it in the hands of the user and let them work it out.
Thank you, Louise. Really powerful advice there. Oli, any last thoughts from you?
Well, love the two examples. And certainly, experimentation and understanding, who you are and those things. I think Steve was asked I think it's a very personal question, and thank you for sharing and opening up about that, and showing that vulnerability. I think from an individual point of view, it's just experiment, find people who have done it. Find a tool that seems to work in your, I don't know, manufacturing personally, so, and your role. So quite hard to kind of pick a particular course or place, but just see if you can find a buddy, find a tool, find a bit, to Maddie's point, find something you don't like doing very much, it feels quite repetitive, and see whether you can play around with it. Almost say, right, I'm going to take an hour a week, an hour a day. I don't know what your schedule looks like, but where can I invest that time myself? Speak to people around you, have a look online, speak to your teams within your organization, and actually just try and find one or two things. And then it's just confidence. Ultimately, it's building that confidence and that willingness and openness to do it and put yourself out there. You can do it in private, you can do it in public, depending on how you want to share. But I think it's just trial and error and tests, and hopefully your organization is providing some tools or opportunity to do that. I completely echo Louise's point when it comes to organizationally. Actually, how do you do that, and how do you kind of surface and allow more people to access it, of course, share. But coming back to my I suppose, thesis through this whole conversation, which has been understand the data, understand the points of unlock, both at a macro level and at a micro level, so at the organizational level, but also as an individual, and then see how you can unlock that through tooling. Ultimately, we're human beings are incredible, right? And we can navigate this, and people should feel that confidence to do so. And it's incumbent upon people like Pearson and HR teams to find solutions to help you, and to reimagine qualifications or training or whatever that is to embed this into it, so that actually we're surfacing the need and the brilliance of human beings.
Absolutely, all of that. And there's a comment in the chat prompted by some of our discussion here around the edgier cases of AI, particularly, and there's a comment there around coaching and mentoring. AI can be really helpful in this environment. All I'd say with all of these case studies that we've put forward today is that they've been thought about in the context of the tech being part of the team, being operating within a framework of some form of rules, some kind of support mechanism. So if you are going off into the edgier cases, just make sure you have that support mechanism around you and the feedback loops to test and check. And it's Maddie's absolutely vital point, which I loved. AI isn't something you can trust. AI is something you need to learn to use. And I think if we consider it in that context, it can be incredibly powerful. But let's just make sure we all stay safe as we're using it as well. We've got 3 minutes left of your valuable time. Julie, thank you for the acknowledgement at that point. We've got 3 minutes left of your time. The With You With Me team are on the call. Obviously, one of the things you can do is reach out to us to discuss this further. That's why we put on these events. We really do value the conversation. We really do believe in the power of the tech, but fundamentally, we believe in the power of people. We want to see people in employment, adding value. And we love the ecosystem that's out there, showing what can be done when you get this right. So Maddie, Louise, Oli, thank you so much for your contribution. To our fabulous audience, thank you for your time. And we've got a couple of minutes left if you want to raise questions in the chat, but otherwise we'll close it there, give you 3 minutes of your life back, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.